From the editors of Cook's Illustrated magazine, it's America's Test Kitchen. With your host, Christopher Kimball. Featuring Test Kitchen chefs Julia Collin-Davison, Bridget Lancaster, Becky Hayes, with Adam Reed in the Equipment Corner and Jack Bishop in the Tasting Lab. Discover the secrets of America's foremost food testers and tasters today on America's Test Kitchen. Today on America's Test Kitchen, Becky uncovers the secrets to perfect scrambled eggs. Next, Adam reviews the best toaster ovens in the Equipment Corner. Then, Yvonne shows Chris how to make foolproof cranberry nut muffins. Finally, Jack challenges Chris to a tasting of peanut butter. That's all right here on America's Test Kitchen. America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances. For over 50 years, Miracle-Gro products have helped home chefs grow fresh vegetables and herbs. Miracle-Gro soils and plant foods provide the essential nutrients plants need to grow bountiful produce. Gardening tips are available online at miraclegro.com. By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. Chateau Saint Michel. Digital wine cellar and pairings can be found online. And by Kohler. Diamond Crystal Salt, the gourmet choice. Plum Amazins from Sunsweet.
We all think that scrambled eggs should be easy to make, but every time we make them, we realize they're hard to make. So let's start with a simple question. Talk to me about the science of eggs. What's in an egg?
All right, an egg. We know an egg contains the white and the yolk. And the white is about 90% water and just 10% protein. And the yolk contains about 50% water, 20% protein, and about 30% fat. The proteins are the very important part that set up the structure in a cooked egg. And in a raw egg, the proteins are all wound up like a ball of spaghetti. So the first thing we have to do is get those proteins to unwind or uncoil. And that starts with the mixing process. Mixing actually starts to get the proteins to unwind so they can react and form this matrix.
After that, when you start cooking, though, there are two problems. One is the time between being properly cooked and overcooked is like 2 seconds. Right. And the other problem is if you overcook it too much, then you actually see the water actually comes out of the egg. So talk to me from a scientific point of view about what's going on.
Okay, so when we cook the egg, we're further uncoiling the proteins. The heat does that. They start to unwind. The more they unwind, the more the different proteins can interact and form a matrix. That matrix traps the water inside. A lot of people think that when you cook an egg and it turns solid that the water is evaporated. It hasn't. It's all trapped inside. The more the proteins interact and bind and form the matrix, the stronger but the tougher the egg will become, to the point that it can even squeeze out water. When we get to that point, we know we've overcooked the egg.
So what about the other ingredients, other things people add to eggs? Do they have any effect at all on how easy it is to cook scrambled eggs?
Okay, good point. So we've already covered the fact that mixing is an important control point. Heating is important. There are ingredients that can also have an effect, and especially those that can help eggs from becoming overcooking and too tough. Salt and fat have this kind of effect that we can add that.
Okay, last thing is we want a nice fluffy curd, not like the French method, which is much more dense and custardy. I assume that has something to do with creating steam, which I also assume has something to do with using a lot of heat. So on one hand, you're saying be careful about how much heat you use, don't overcook. On the other hand, we need a lot of heat to create a lot of steam to get fluffy eggs.
Right, that's the problem. You do need a lot of heat to create steam. Without steam, you won't get fluffy eggs. So that's the secret, how you have to figure out how you get that right balance, Chris.
All right, so you've given us some hints about how we can solve the problem of scrambled eggs, but we have to go find out for ourselves. Let's go into the test kitchen with Becky and figure out a formula for great scrambled eggs.
Sounds good to me.
Now, before we investigate how to make the best scrambled eggs, we need to do a little test to find out how hot your stovetop gets, because these eggs are going to be cooked over medium-high. Some stoves actually have too much energy output, some have not enough, and some are just right. So how do you figure it out? Well, here's how you do it. Buy a 10-inch disposable aluminum pie plate like this. Put 2 cups of warm, that is room temperature water in it. Turn the heat to high. If it takes 3.5 minutes for it to bubble around the edges like it is here, not in the center, then you know you have a standard heat output for the top of the range, and you can follow the settings in our recipes. If it takes longer, you don't have quite enough heat, so you might want to use high instead of medium high. If it takes 2.5 to 3 minutes, less time, then instead of medium high, you might want to use medium. There's a quick test to figure out if your stove is like ours. Now let's bring in Becky and start our recipe for the best scrambled eggs.
That's right. So you can see we have our eggs here. We're making enough to serve 4 people, so we're using 8 eggs. So if you want to help me get cracking here.
Into this bowl.
Yeah, we'll go into this bowl. So that's 8 whole eggs, and you can see I also have 2 egg yolks here. And the egg yolks will add extra richness to the scrambled eggs, and it will also make the dish more tender.
Okay.
3/8 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and I have a 1/4 cup of half and half. So I'm going to beat these up, and I'm using a fork, not a whisk. It's really important not to overbeat the eggs, so I just want to beat them until they're smooth and uniform in color.
So there are 3 very quick science points in terms of what's going on here for tender scrambled eggs. The first is we added fat in terms of half and half. That makes it harder for the proteins to bind together. The second is we're adding salt, which is pretty standard, but there are sodium ions, which are positive, and chloride ions, which are negative. What happens when they bind to proteins, they tend to bind in clumps, that all positive or all negative. Now, if you have like charges on the protein, that means they repel each other. The proteins are less likely to bind hard to each other. And the final thing is don't overbeat it. When you overbeat it, the proteins are actually going to get together. So that means you have lighter, fluffier eggs that don't get tough.
Okay, so it's time to get these eggs going. And we're going to use 2 heats for this method. We're going to start off with high heat, and that helps the eggs to really puff up and to get some volume like we want. And then we're going to turn it down to low heat, and that will prevent the eggs from overcooking, because nothing's worse than overcooked scrambled eggs. So I have a tablespoon of butter, if you want to turn on the heat to medium-high. So we're using a 10-inch nonstick skillet. A lot of times a recipe with this amount of eggs would call for a larger skillet, but a smaller skillet actually traps more steam because the eggs are deeper. So you can see the butter is fully melted, hasn't started to brown. Let's put our eggs in. And you see that little sizzle, you want that to happen. If that doesn't happen, your pan's a little bit too cool. And I'm starting my timer for 2.5 minutes. I'm just using my spatula, keep the eggs moving.
Now, we did find if we didn't use a medium-high heat, a little bit less heat, you didn't get as much steam. So the more heat, the more steam. It's like rapidly boiling water versus simmering water. The more steam, the steam actually provides lift. It's like a hot air balloon. It provides lift, separates the curds, so you get much lighter, fluffier scrambled eggs.
That's right. I'm just looking for when the spatula starts to leave a trail. It's just starting to happen. You see that? When I push it through the eggs. So let's turn the heat down to low. Now we'll go for another 30 seconds or so, folding the eggs. Another advantage to a small skillet is that you can keep the eggs moving a little better than you could in a bigger skillet. So once you turn down the heat, it takes 30 to 60 seconds. So keep your timer nearby, but really you have to keep your eye on things, see what's happening with your particular stove. All right, let's serve them up. See how they're nice and fluffy, nice big curds. It's just what we wanted.
Those are delicious.
The yolks make a difference, don't they? Those 2 yolks?
The curds are nice, they're creamy, they're very soft.
Yeah.
You have plenty of time to get them out of the pan before they overcook. These are fabulous.
Really tender.
So it's a very simple recipe, but there are a few secrets. The first is we used 8 whole eggs and 2 yolks to a 10-inch pan. That's very important, nonstick pan. The second is that we use a little bit of salt, which a lot of people do, but that means the proteins don't bind together so quickly. Half and half, add some fat, also stops the proteins from binding. And we didn't overbeat, which I usually do. You overbeat, and then the proteins will form together. Start medium-high, stir all the time, make nice curds, and then finish on low. Gives you a lot of time to come off the stove at exactly the right moment. There you have it. For America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, a fabulous recipe, simple recipe for the perfect scrambled eggs. You know, downsizing might be a dirty word in this economy, but sometimes it's a great idea, like when it comes to cars. I drive a Mini, I love it. Easy to park, it drives like a sports car. It's even great in the snow. But when it comes to ovens, the downsized oven is a toaster oven. And I don't understand downsizing ovens. I have 2 toaster ovens. They're in the box in the basement. I don't want to give up the counter space. They're ugly, and they do nothing that an oven cannot do. So I'm here in the equipment corner with Adam saying, you know, why a toaster oven?
You are a toaster oven curmudgeon, Chris. Let's change your mind.
It's unnecessary.
No, they're not unnecessary. They're actually very useful if you need a small second oven for something, if your other ovens are occupied. If you want to bake a couple of potatoes without heating up the whole kitchen, a toaster oven is really worth it. Also, for those of us who don't have dedicated toasters, you can make toast in a toaster oven.
I doubt that, actually.
Well, we'll disprove that too. We tested 10 toaster ovens, Chris. The price range was from $58 to $250. We did a bunch of different tests. Obviously, we made toast. We also roasted 4-pound chickens. We baked lemon cookies. We heated up frozen pizzas. Some of these things have gotten really fancy. They come with crazy features like this one right in front of you, that top compartment, that's a bun warmer. Some of them have food dehydrators, some of them have chicken rotisseries. They come with manuals that are thick like a novel. Not interested in reading this before I go to bed. We wanted controls that were pretty intuitive, pretty simple to use. We also, because it's a toaster oven, wanted to know that it could make toast. The results were pretty uneven across the 10 models. Some of them barely heated up the bread, never mind toasting it fully. We also did 6 slices on the tray, and that not only gave us an idea of the toasting ability, it gave us an idea of the heating pattern within the oven cavity. That led us to our heat tracking tests. We wanted to see what was going on inside of these ovens. So we used thermocouples and our temperature tracking software, which is connected to the thermocouples. We set all the ovens to 350 degrees. There were highs of about 425 or 430 degrees. There were lows of 230 degrees, all set at 350. The one that we liked the best was this model right here. This is the Smart Oven by Breville. And it did a really good job. It was accurate. The heating elements in the Breville are made of quartz rather than nickel and chromium, and quartz responds faster to changes in the thermostat, and so you get a more consistent heat, which accounted for these nice uniform pieces of toast. The price was
Here we are, folks.
high.
How much was it?
$250. This was tied for the most expensive oven. It was really good. If you don't want to spend $250, and I know you probably don't, we have a Best Buy. This is the Hamilton Beach Set and Forget toaster oven. It's $100, so it's less than half the price. The heating system isn't quite as sophisticated as the Breville, but the controls were nice and clear and easy to use, and the food was uniform throughout. It did a pretty decent job on toast, chicken, cookies, and pizza.
So I'm not totally convinced because the toaster costs $25. You know?
You're a hard sell.
I know, but okay. For those of you who are sold on the idea of a toaster oven, the Breville is beautiful, does a fabulous job. But for $100, which doesn't seem too outrageous, Hamilton Beach Set and Forget actually does a very good job. Not quite as good looking, but it'll save you $150. Thousands of folks over the years have asked, hey, how do I get a job working in your test kitchen? Well, there are 3 things you need to do. You need to have great knife skills. You have to love to make a recipe 50 or 60 times in a row. And then you have to take our bench test. What's that? You have to come up with a recipe for a great cranberry nut muffin, and we have to like it. So here are 3 muffins that did not make the grade. The first is a basic cake batter with just some cranberries thrown in. Did they get a job? Don't think so. This person pureed the cranberries and made what looks like a strawberry muffin. Would you see them around? I don't. And finally, someone, probably a hippie from the 60s, decided that a whole wheat cranberry nut muffin would be a good idea. A good idea? Bad idea. So let's go into the test kitchen with Yvonne, our resident expert baker, and see if she can make a fabulous cranberry nut muffin that'll pass the test. So, a little surprise for you. These are Yvonne's recipe when you first came. This is your bench test. These are your muffins. Gaze upon Yvonne's cranberry nut muffins. They were okay.
They were good. It was
well, you got the job.
It was a good effort.
Narrow.
Great effort.
You got the job. So now we're going to do better.
That's right.
You've learned since then.
I have. I've learned a lot.
There we go.
Cranberry nut muffins aren't as easy as you would think. Cranberries have that really intense, bitter tart flavor that's delicious, but in a muffin, it tends to overwhelm all the other ingredients. And as for the nuts, a lot of recipes that we tested use just chunks of nuts thrown into the batter, and they kind of steam inside the muffin. They don't really stay crunchy, and they're not really evenly distributed. So for our muffin, the goal was to create the perfect muffin with the perfect balance of flavor and texture. I have 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour here, and we're just gonna add 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. We're gonna whisk this together, and we're using a bit less flour than you normally would in a muffin recipe. And the reason is that we were looking for the muffin cake part to have a little bit of a heartier flavor than just a regular plain cake. So we realized that if we swapped out almost 1/2 of the flour for ground nuts, that was the answer. So we have here 1 1/4 cups of toasted pecan halves. We tried walnuts, we tried cashews, we tried almonds, but we like the pecans the best because they're nice and buttery, and they also have a nice sweetness that we felt really complemented the tartness of the cranberries. And we're gonna add 1 cup plus 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar. And we're gonna process the pecans with the sugar because the sugar is an abrasive ingredient, and it's gonna really scour the nuts and bring out as much of the oils and the nut flavor as possible. And that's going to take about 10 to 15 seconds. Okay. This is looking good. Looks like wet sand, and you don't want to take it too far. If you process it too far, the oil will start to come out too much, and the muffin will probably be greasy and a little bit denser than you want. So now we're going to add the rest of the wet ingredients, and I have 2 large eggs, 6 tablespoons of melted and slightly cooled unsalted butter, and then 1/2 cup of whole milk. And we tried a few other dairies, but we felt that the clean flavor of the milk really let the flavor of the nuts and the cranberries be the stars. We're just gonna whisk this together until it's combined. So now we're just gonna whisk in the dry ingredients. So right here, you can see this batter right now is pretty wet. So what we're gonna do is not bake the muffins right away, but to let it sit for at least 30 minutes and let it rest.
So we're a bit curious about the science of this batter and the 2 very different things going on. One is starch molecules in the batter absorb liquid, they get bigger, and they simply thicken up the batter. The second thing is they're protein molecules. 2 of them, glutenin and gliadin, in the presence of water, can move around freely, find each other, and create a matrix, and that matrix is much like kneading dough. It develops structure, so as they bake up nice and high.
So now while the batter's resting, we're gonna make a topping for the muffins. And I have here 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of light brown sugar, pat, 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of granulated sugar, and 2 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter. So I'm gonna process this until the mixture, again, resembles wet sand, and that's gonna take about 8 pulses. So I have 1/2 cup of pecans, and I'm gonna process this just until they're coarsely chopped, and that'll be about 4 pulses. So Chris, it's been about 30 minutes, and I just want to show you this batter and show you how much thicker it's gotten. It's had a chance to hydrate, and these muffins are going to hold their shape, and that was all without us having to alter the ingredients. We were able to keep the flavor that we liked. So I have 2 cups of cranberries here, and I'm using frozen. The cranberry season is pretty short, and basically after December or January, it's impossible to find fresh whole cranberries. So frozen cranberries are fine, but because they were frozen, I just wanted to take the thaw off them just a little bit. So I microwaved them for about 30 to 45 seconds just to defrost them a little bit on high. Okay. We found that the best way to treat them was to not leave them whole, but to coarsely chop them. And then to help with the tartness of them, we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of confectioner's sugar. And then to help with the bitterness, we're gonna use a little bit of salt. And we only need a little bit. I have 1/4 teaspoon here, which is just a touch. So we're gonna process this just until cranberries are coarsely chopped, and that's gonna take about 4 to 5 pulses. Okay, so now the moment you've been waiting for, we're gonna add them to the batter. So I'm just gonna gently fold these into the batter. You don't wanna overwork the batter too much. So now we're just gonna fill the muffin tin. And it's okay that the muffin batter is mounded in the middle. You don't need to make it even.
And if you don't have an ice cream scoop like this, use this 2 tablespoons?
Yeah, 2 tablespoons would work great. So now we're gonna just top it with the nut streusel. Okay, and then just gonna gently press the streusel into the batter just to help it adhere. So now it's time to bake them in a 425-degree oven until they're golden and firm, and that's going to take about 17 to 18 minutes, and I'm going to rotate the pan halfway through baking.
long time ago, peanut butter used to be a complete no-brainer, and that's until I started going to health food stores in the 70s when you had sort of grind your own, and I grind up the peanuts and take it home, and of course there was no salt and the oil separated. So even today in my refrigerator, I have a Jif or Skippy, and then I have sort of the natural one that one of my kids brings home. And I always use the Jif or Skippy because it's easy to spread, and I like the fact that it's homogenized. So maybe I should rethink this whole notion, maybe not. We're here to do an updated tasting of peanut butters.
I've got plenty of peanut butter for you. Peanut butter is changing, Chris. Now this is the old-fashioned peanut butter right here. This is just peanuts and salt, and you can see an awful lot of oil on the top. And that's how peanut butter was until the 20s, when somebody figured out that if they added hydrogenated fat, you have the creamy spread that you and I grew up on as kids. So the new thing is there are all these natural peanut butters, and of course the government doesn't regulate the word natural.
Of course not.
You can call anything
it's
natural.
America.
So they have figured out that rather than putting hydrogenated vegetable, cottonseed, or soybean oil, that they could take palm oil, which is naturally high in saturated fat. And you can see there's a little bit of oil here. It doesn't quite get as smooth as the ones with the hydrogenated oil, but it's certainly not like the oil slick of the old-fashioned. So we're really interested to see how do these natural peanut butters do in a taste test. We did the tasting 3 ways. The way you're doing it, we made a peanut sauce to go with satays, and we also baked peanut butter cookies. So anything that you're liking?
This is clearly the best texture, the worst texture, the most natural. These two were close, and I probably picked this one, but they were very close. The smooth one was?
That's the natural Jif. It was our runner-up.
Oh,
we
like
liked
that.
it. It's with the palm oil.
But it has more of a kind of a toasty flavor. I like it.
It does have a nice flavor. We wish it were even smoother, but it's an excellent choice.
Now this one was the coarsest, obviously.
Right, that's the Smucker's Natural.
Yeah.
There's just peanuts and salt in that,
Yeah.
and it tastes like what you think it's going to taste
And if
like.
you still own a tie-dye shirt like I do, you'd probably like that one. I thought these two were fairly close. I probably would pick this one, but it was close. So
That's the winner, Skippy.
Yeah.
Now that's old-fashioned. That's with the hydrogenated vegetable oil. It was our taster's favorite. Didn't love the peanut flavor on that, but people thought it had a great texture, and it reminded them, I think, of what they had when they were a kid. That's a smart balance. So this is another one of the natural ones. This has palm oil and flaxseed oil. We did not like this one. You didn't seem to pick up on this. People in the tasting panel thought it was a little fishy tasting. It's like flaxseed oil has sometimes that fishiness about it. So that was a natural one that we thought was at the bottom of the rankings.
okay, so the winner was the Skippy.
Skippy.
And Jif was number 2.
Natural
The
Jif
winners.
was runner-up, yes.
Okay, so the winner was Skippy and Jif. Seems like we've been here before.
We have been here before.
Skippy and Jif. Anyway, so Skippy number 1 and Jif number 2.
Okay, it's been about 18 minutes, and we're going to check to see if these are done. And they look golden, and we're just going to gently touch the top, and they're firm, so they're ready. So now that they're finished, I'm going to let the muffins cool in the pan for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to take them out of the pan and let them cool on a wire rack for another 10 minutes. So Chris, I want you to forget that earlier bench test that you tried, and I want you to try these.
They look great. I mean, this is like the ultimate makeover. By the way, we said earlier you had to let the batter rest, and we have right here an example of what happens. These were baked without resting the batter, and as you said, there wasn't enough structure, they wouldn't rise properly, so there you go. The proof is in the muffin. Oh. Now I know why we hired you. See, we knew there was a lot of potential there. Oh. These are fabulous.
You can really taste the pecans.
Well, instead of just a basic yellow cake batter, this is really nutty, has a lot of flavor to it. The cranberries aren't sour. These are an A+. So I guess we have to extend your contract now. So the secret of great cranberry nut muffins is throw out everything you know about basic muffins. We replaced half the flour with pecans ground with sugar. We let the batter rest for half an hour to develop some structure. Then we added the cranberries at the end, but first we processed them. They were almost frozen with a little bit of sugar and salt to take out that acerbic bite. So there you have it for America's Test Kitchen in your kitchen, a fabulous makeover of cranberry nut muffins. You can get this recipe and all the recipes from the season at americastestkitchentv.com. You also find our testings, our tastings, and you can view selected episodes of the show. And you can join us on Twitter, and you can also join us on Facebook. And now I'm going to join you for the rest of the muffin. This is fabulous.
America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances.
And by Kohler. inspiring home chefs to create a professional level kitchen with innovative sinks, faucets, and cook centers. Kohler.
And by Diamond Crystal Salt for the professional chef and those who want to cook like one. Diamond Crystal, the gourmet choice. By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. By Plum Amazins, diced dried plums from Sunsweet for amazing recipes. By Miracle Grow, the gardener's friend. And by Chateau Saint Michel.